Somehow, while having very low expectations of what Dark Souls 2 could do, I was surprised that I was even more underwhelmed playing the game than I originally thought. Dark Souls 2 is weird, because it feels like it wants to be something greater and it has the foundation to be something greater, but because of many different issues and many aspects of the game, it ends up being the lesser version of the Dark Souls formula and on many occasions a subject of ridicule. Everything I've heard about this game from the internet painted it as the worst thing on the planet, and even when I talked to people who didn't seem to hate the game, they all agreed that it was pretty meh.
Just felt the universe shake a little, gotta be careful when I use that word, goddamn.
But obviously, the last thing a person loses is their hope, and I still had the hope that the game would be at least entertaining enough to where I could muster the courage to call it good. But after playing the game and finishing it, to say that I was extremely disappointed would somehow be underselling it. Hey, hi. Please sub. At the very least, leave a comment. Thank you, onto the video. I mean, where can I even begin?
Fuck it. Let's just start at the end of the game. The final boss took me less time to beat than the credits did to scroll completely. I'm not kidding!
One of the biggest problems with this game is that for a big portion of the game, it just isn't challenging. I more or less went in with the same build that I had in the first game. I went all in on the Onga Bonga weapons that required 2 collective brain cells to use, and for the most part, rarely did I feel like I was genuinely being challenged. Did I die? Multiple times. Did I rage? Once or twice. Did the Shrine of Amana make me want to go on my villain arc? Yes, but unfortunately for it, I have no enemies. These challenging moments, while there, feel like a colossal step down from the difficulty of Dark Souls, which to many should be a good thing, but the thing is that Dark Souls is designed and it lives and dies through the difficulty. And when you take the difficulty out of the way, the game suddenly becomes a lot simpler and a lot more brain dead. The enemies don't feel like a challenge. For the most part they do very small damage, and the bosses are some of the worst bosses I have seen in the Souls franchise. They don't feel imposing, they don't feel threatening, and their patterns are so incredibly simple and they lack a lot of diversity. Am I going insane here? Most of them I beat in the first 3 or so attempts. A lot of them I beat in my first attempt, and the final boss of the game I beat in the second fucking try. Now, to give the benefit of the doubt, there were a lot of bosses that I fought while summoning the phantoms that help you fight them. They could be the reason as to why I found many of them so easy. However, for a lot of the game, I wasn't using those fucking phantoms, so what's the reason for those bosses being so easy? Maybe I just don't have a life. I generally don't think that the game is very entertaining without the difficulty of Dark Souls. Is it just a me thing? Maybe? But at the same time, I imagine that in some way, this is what people come to the game for, is it not? Maybe the game was trying to be easier for newcomers to get into, but honestly, I think that it went too far the opposite direction if that was truly the intention. While playing the game, I did notice something interesting, and it was the way in which the game tried to add into the previous mechanics already available in the first game, and how a lot of the times they were way worse.
What can I say? A hater is a hater through and through.
The first thing that you will immediately notice are the changes done to the dodge roll, which in this game is absolutely pitiful. I think I could probably tank someone hitting me with a 10-hit combo with a metal bat better than if I tried to dodge roll it. The dodge roll now has its own stat to level up, and if you don't level it up, then the dodge roll is about as useful as the fucking parry. You are not using the parry most of the time. Why they decided to do this when you only need to level it up a couple of levels before it becomes absolutely useless as a stat is absolutely beyond me. Another thing you will immediately notice is the weird way in which they handled the Estus flask, and healing in general, honestly. At the beginning of the game you have either 1 or 0 Estus flasks, I can't remember at this moment, and they only healed you a tiny amount, so you had to go out of your way to find the other ones. Honestly, I don't think this is that bad of a mechanic, and honestly, I like having to find the shards more than having to use my humanity on the bonfires, but at the same time, I would have preferred them more if I didn't have to find them from complete scratch. Also, they changed how you die? Okay, not really, you'll still be getting your ass beat the same way, but they change what happens when you die. After dying, the player will lose a certain amount of their HP until they regain their humanity, but until then they will continuously lose HP until a certain point in which you stay the same way you are. It's an interesting idea to be sure. The thing is, it's kinda shit. I just don't really like the way they executed the idea. You still have the punishment of losing all the souls you got before, and that punishment makes sense. But with the HP, it feels like they got cold feet at the last second. It doesn't really feel like a punishment. It's like your health decreases like 5% after dying like 5 times. It's just a minor inconvenience, and it doesn't really add anything else. The changes that it brings are not substantial enough. Like, why even bother? Like, why even add it? Something that I forgot to mention was, even in the first game, to be entirely honest, was the durability system. It's shit there and it's shit here. I don't really know why they included the mechanic to begin with. After a certain amount of uses, the weapon that you have will break. Of course, that's obvious, that's what the durability system is there for. But the problem is that the weapons lasted like 3 One Piece arcs and a half. I don't think that I had a weapon break on me throughout the entire playthrough I did of Dark Souls 1. And honestly, it's so easy to fix the weapons that I don't think the game would have been affected at all if the mechanic was never implemented in the first place. Dark Souls 2 is pretty much the same as Dark Souls 1, except that the weapons and the armor break easier. However, it still feels very useless. I just don't think that durability systems should be in Dark Souls at all, honestly. The one good addition that I can think of is the change down to the bonfires, that are now the fast travel points in the game. You can fast travel to any bonfire in the game without restriction, and that is honestly one of the best aspects that this game introduced. But at the same time, this mechanic goes hand in hand with one of the most controversial decisions in the game as well.
Can this game do anything well? No.
One of the things that people praised about the first game was that the level design truly sold the idea that the game was one cohesive world, with many pathways that connected different levels together and made the world of the game feel believable. Dark Souls 2, on the other hand, adopted a different philosophy of having a more linear world to explore, and because of the linearity of the world, the fast travel system was implemented to reduce annoying backtracking sessions that admittedly started getting on my nerves by the end of Souls 1. This is honestly one of the best features added in Souls 2. It makes navigating the world a lot easier, but the world itself doesn't really feel like a world. The many stages in the game don't give me the impression that they're in the same world, making that world feel realistic, but instead it gives me the impression of a Mario game with its many different level themes. How I ever managed to compare these two is a feat that I'll never know. Like, I think that this isn't an uncommon statement to make, but these levels definitely don't feel like they were made with the intention of being in the same world. Individually, yeah, I think that these levels look pretty cool, but as a whole, meh. The level design is also incredibly unremarkable as well. I don't really like the way in which the game just kind of shoves enemies everywhere, like, dog, get off my dick, bro! One of my least favorite aspects of Souls games is the concept of the run, as I saw it being called once in a video by YouTuber Kbash, which is the walk that you take from the bonfire to the boss. There really isn't any reason to have to run in these games. Like, in general, I was never really a fan of it. After losing Souls the first time, it is true that the game lacks real consequences for dying, but this always just seems like a waste of my time. Why should I have to beat a section that I already demonstrated to be capable of doing just fine, just to get to the part that I was struggling to beat? And somehow Dark Souls 2 also fucks this up too. How do you even fuck up shit? The game just bombards you with so many enemies during this time that it just ends up wasting your time even more. As I said before, none of this really is difficult, it's just really annoying for the sake of being annoying. The game feels more like the first Dark Souls game than the first Dark Souls ever did. Everything about this game, from the main gameplay to the presentation of the bosses, feels like the first time they tried the Souls formula. But it isn't, and because of that the game is worse than it needs to be, because we know that they can do better. Because they literally did! Dark Souls 2 came out after Souls 1 and right before Bloodborne. Two critically acclaimed marvels, and the fact that this is the only Souls game to be criticized this heavily when all the other games are hailed as masterpieces makes it feel even worse than it really is. Hidetaka Miyazaki was not very involved in the project from what I could gather, and the lack of his presence is definitely felt in the final product. Dark Souls 2, it's not a completely horrible experience. I can see people having fun with this game, and there are some good points in the game even when compared to the rest of the series. But personally, this game just wasn't for me.
Well, that's all the time that I've had for today. I'm just a random stranger you met on the internet. But hey, just call me Pseudo.